Hello, I'm Emmett, and today I wanted to talk about how I draw little faces onto little people. But more specifically, for the sake of a clickable topic, I'm going to focus in on the differences between Microsoft Paint and Clip Studio Paint. The first of these LazyMan stop-motion animated video thingies that I make was so long ago that Microsoft Paint is all I had access to, and I made it work. It's very simple. It's kind of the blunt force option. It doesn't do much, but if you know what to do with it, you can get a lot done. By the time I made the second one, I think Paint 3D was a thing. I still preferred the traditional Microsoft Paint. I didn't really use Paint 3D much except for the backgrounds, but I might talk about that a little more later on. But yeah, Microsoft Paint is pretty easy to use. It's generally just loaded up onto the computers automatically, so it's right there. I can right-click on the picture I want, hit Edit, and that loads the picture. I can select the circle tool, draw two little circles for the eyes, and I can adjust them. I like that about Microsoft Paint. Once you draw it, you can then move it around too and reposition it. And that is great because I often need to reposition and tweak things. Also, just a comical little note, when I'm drawing these faces, I'll often have a mirror or my phone up and I'll like react to things like I make goofy faces, I study those goofy faces, and I copy the expressions onto my drawings. My phone was once full of pictures that I'd taken myself, but then I started running out of storage space, so I deleted them all. Most of them. No, them all, I think. I can't remember. But yeah, that would really come in handy with the eyebrows. The eyebrows are always just simple little lines. Again, I like how Microsoft Paint lets you adjust the lines. It's not complicated, but I consider that a good thing, especially if you're a kid trying to do this. It's very basic and intuitive. The hardest thing for me is usually getting the pupil position right. I don't want my people to look lazy-eyed. Sometimes they do, and then I have to fix it. But yeah, going over to Clip Paint, at first, I was kind of disappointed, because I went to the circle tool, like I might on Microsoft Paint, and I made a circle, and then it just stuck there. There was no adjustment. There was no way of really telling how big the circle was going to be. It just, you make the circle, you try to position it as best you can intuitively, but it doesn't usually end up where I think it's going to end up. And then there's just the circle. That really annoyed me. Why can't I adjust the circle? Well, then I remembered layers.
Layers!
Layers.
It's so many layers!
Layers are magical things. I have my base picture, I can create a new layer on top of that, I can draw the face onto the separate layer, and then I can adjust the whole layer. Or if I don't want to adjust the layer, I can just select the part that I want to adjust and move that around. If I wanted to, I could make each individual feature of the face its own layer and then just move them all around automatically. But I haven't done that yet because it's seemed a little too complicated for what I need to do. So yeah, now that I'm more familiar with the way Clip Paint operates, I do think I'm going to shift entirely over to Clip Paint. Because at first I was like, oh, I'm going to have to use Microsoft Paint still because like that's the one I know how to use. But yeah, layers are very handy, especially if I'm like drawing a sideways face. It was always really hard to draw on regular Microsoft Paint because I can only draw an oval. So it's like if a face is sideways, like I can kind of draw a circle and I can use the lines and the fill tool to make that circle look like more of like the pie slice shape to make it look like the person is facing in a different direction. But for this eye, it's like I can only make an oval, and especially like if their head is tilted, the oval will only ever like be, well, oval shaped. So it looks a little goofy sometimes. With Clip Paint and layers, then you can use kind of like 3D warping tools to warp the eye to make it actually look like it's turning with the head. It's still a little tricky to get it to look exactly the right angle that it needs to be, but at least it can be done. That couldn't be done in Microsoft Paint. Maybe it could have been done in Paint 3D. I never really messed with Paint 3D that much. The only time I would really use Paint 3D was sometimes to get the backgrounds out. I forget why now I would do that. I guess it must have a better fill tool, because I know you can adjust like the tolerance and stuff like that with just the color dump. Backgrounds. annoy me. With the first video I did, I just had a painted background, but I always thought that looked cheesy. So then I put up green paper, kind of wrapping paper stuff, so that it would hopefully be able to key out in Adobe. You can't key it out, so I instead have to fill it. But even then, it would sometimes leave little green blurry edges, and those wouldn't always key out, so there's still these green smudges in the finished video. I'm hoping to avoid that now that I have Studio Paint, because most of what I have been doing with Clip Paint is photo bashing concept art stuff. Like, I have a couple of videos of like Batman casting where I'm like just cutting out different parts of pictures and pasting them together and then shading over it to try and make it look like it's one thing and stuff like that. That's what I've been primarily doing, so I'm familiar with the concept of erasing backgrounds off of pictures. So it should be fairly straightforward to just keep doing that. And then I think it'll work to cut out the green screen step entirely and just export it as a PNG with a blank background. So that way I can just drop it into Adobe and the background is already cut out and I don't have to worry about all the green smudges. Or it might be prudent to have a background in Clip Studio Paint that I can just use and adjust and then export it as one picture. It depends if I ever have like the angle shift between pictures, I'd want, well, I don't know, would I want the background to stay the same or would I want it to change with the picture? It depends. I'll probably end up doing a variety of methods because I don't know for sure which one will work the best. Also, another magical thing about Studio Paint, when I have the facial expressions on their own separate layer, I can keep them. One of the main reasons why I never wanted to do just a full-blown stop motion picture, beyond just the fact that it would take so much more time and effort, was also specifically because I didn't think I would be able to be consistent. For the most part, I've been drawing each picture individually, which means there's always gonna be like that shift and change. So if I had to do like actual frames, these aren't framed, like these are pictures. I'm trying to take pictures that can tell a story without movement. I'm kind of trying to have my cake and eat it too in that regard. I'm hoping it works out. But yeah, having the faces on their own layer, that means I can move from one picture to the next if they're within the same shot. Like if I have just a character kind of standing here, either something changes in the background or like if he just kind of like moves a little bit, like I can warp the picture to kind of move just that little bit that I need to move. I can use the same facial expression, so hopefully it'll feel more natural and less jarring, unless it'll just come across like I'm lazy. The biggest hurdle that I've had to cross with Studio Paint is the color grading. I don't know if I just need to adjust my settings or what's going on here, but when I first started using it and I exported some of the pictures and I had them right next to the original picture, it upped the brightness and lowered the saturation or something like that. It looked off. And at that point, I wasn't intending to use Clip Paint for every picture. So I was like, if every picture is going to be going back and forth between the regular color grading and then the weird export problem that I'm having with this, that's gonna be bad. I can't do that. So that was kind of another reason why at first I thought I wasn't gonna end up using Clip Paint. But then I figured out that I can just add an adjustment layer, or what are the adjustment layer is what they're called in Adobe. Correction layer is what they're called in Clip Paint, but basically the same thing. You can up the saturation or change the contrast and keep that layer at the top, and then all the other layers underneath it will go through that same filter. And so then if Clip Paint has the weird glitch where it'll export everything at a lower contrast or however that works, now everything is going through that filter, which will adjust for that. But it took a lot of dialing in. Like I had to, like, okay, up the saturation and the contrast, export it, compare the two pictures, see if that matched, do it again, adjust it some more, compare those two pictures, see if they match, and eventually I got it dialed in, but it took a lot of tinkering. So that's probably the biggest con, but another pro would be the blending tool. I don't intend for this to look drastically different from the other ones. I still want it to look like the same style, but if I can make it look a little more natural, I will. So using the blending tool allows me to smooth out the difference between the animated eyes and the physical subject of the picture. And especially with the lids and like kind of making the shadows under their eyes, that's kind of where I've been using it. Or there's a couple shots where like there's like a sharp shadow. And so having the blending tool or being able to erase a little bit allows me to kind of bring that shadow back on top of the eyes instead of just having the eyes be like shining beacons in the shadow of the face. I think that's about all I have for today. At the time I'm filming this, I've been at it for like a week and a half. I've gotten like 30 pictures done, and I think there's almost 500 total. And that's just in the first video. Not all of those are gonna have to be altered though. I need to remind myself that. Hopefully that will make the process go smoother, because it's not like I'm actually animating 500 different pictures. Still gonna take a while though.